This conference will now be recorded.
It's my pleasure this morning to welcome John Kiefner, who is the Vice President of Risk Control with Johnson Kendall Johnson. And he's joining us this morning to speak about ways that communities can improve their accident prevention efforts. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Allison, thank you very much. John Kiefner with Johnson Kendall and Johnson here. I head up our Safety and Risk Control Department at JKJ. All of our consultants have a background in workers' comp. I personally worked with a carrier for 7 years. We work with over 225 senior living communities. And as a group, our ultimate goal when focusing on accident prevention and workers' compensation is to drive down the injuries, which in the end drives down the experience modifier, and in the end results in lower premiums. For those of you who are not aware, the experience modifier is a reflection of a 3-year history. So accidents that happen today are not impacting you next year, but are impacting you for 3 years to come. So when Allison asked us to speak on accident prevention, which is quite a large, broad topic, I thought in 15 minutes, what can I possibly communicate? So I should have probably titled this, How to Solve Your Accident Prevention and Workers' Comp Problems in 15 Minutes. But I tossed out 5 different ideas. These are 5 areas that I think at a very minimum must be in place, must be focused on for you to be successful in reducing accidents and controlling your workers' comp. So let's jump right into it. We have about 2 to 3 minutes for each topic, the first one being resident handling. So I'm going to make the assumption that all communities on the call have a resident handling and transfer program in place, hopefully have a safe patient handling committee, and hopefully are doing initial and ongoing training. So why do injuries still occur? 2 reasons that I believe injuries are still occurring in healthcare communities surrounding the resident handling topic is because we're not identifying what's going on behind closed doors. Once the resident room door closes and employees are making their own decisions, we are somewhat out of control. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I also think that we are not spending enough time focusing on resident handling and transfer outside of nursing. So looking at independent living, looking at the community center. Those are areas where we don't necessarily have equipment, but possibly should. So let's backtrack to the resident rooms. About 15 years ago, JKJ started conducting what we call resident transfer drills within our communities, where we set up mock scenarios in a room. For example, resident staged next to a toilet in a bathroom. We ring the call bell. We take a look at the response time. We take a look at the assessment of the resident. We take a look at whether or not the staff conducted vitals. Decision making as far as manual lifting versus equipment. If equipment is brought into a room, is the equipment used properly? Does the staff know the functionality of the equipment? And lastly, we coach. We make sure that what we have observed throughout the resident transfer drill is used as a coaching experience on the spot and then is used to incorporate into training moving forward. So the second item that I mentioned was the independent living and community centers. Most of the response into those areas, we see security, we see maintenance, and then we see nursing show up. And obviously an assessment needs to be done before any further action is taken if we have a fallen resident in independent living or community center. But what are we doing about equipment in those areas? So some of our communities have looked into fold-up Hoyer lifts that can be put into closets, can be put under beds, can be put in tight areas where immediately, if they're responding to a fallen resident, they're able to access these items. There are other tools that can be used as well that I won't get into today, but just paying attention and assessing the exposure that you have outside of nursing from a resident handling standpoint is very important. Next topic, slips, trips, and falls. So it all starts with the floor itself. Have you actually tested the floor surfaces in your building? JKJ uses a tribometer to slip test flooring, which gives us a readout of the coefficient of friction of the floors when wet and dry, and we're able to see if there's a differential. We also encourage our clients to send us samples of flooring that they are anticipating to use in future projects, so we can give them a good idea as to whether or not that floor will perform well, rather than installing it and then deciding that something needs to be done. If we do determine that an existing floor is slippery, there are various ways to treat floors to make them less slippery, and then we can go back and test to see if we've made an improvement. The cleaning method and the products used on the floor, microfiber mopping versus wet mopping. Obviously, microfiber is much less wet, picks up a lot of the dirt, and is probably a better way to go for the majority of the cleaning throughout resident rooms and other hard surfaces. Training. Are we addressing trip hazards as well as slip and fall hazards? If you take a look at what would be considered a slip and fall in your community, and you take a look at the entire trend, let's say over a 5-year period, you will likely find that about half of the slips and falls are indeed trips over bed cords, other cords in hallways, etc. So when you're doing training, trips have to be incorporated as well as the slip hazard. Lastly, footwear. Slip-resistant footwear is likely used within your kitchen, within your dining staff. And I would ask you to take a look at the amount of slips and falls that you've had in your kitchen, which is the most hazardous area in the entire community. You probably haven't had very many because you have a slip-resistant footwear policy. Clients of ours that are self-insured, they crunch the numbers for a 5-year period to determine how much they're putting out from a slip, trip, and fall standpoint, and they make a determination 9 times out of 10 to expand slip-resistant footwear outside of just the kitchen. So that would be a consideration that I would encourage you to think about and look into. Lastly, with slip-resistant footwear, what makes it slip-resistant? Most people say sneakers, and that's completely false. It's the sole on the bottom of the shoe. You can have a dress shoe that is better than a sneaker. So the slip-resistant footwear, if you put in a policy, should say it on the bottom, should come with literature, etc. All right, changing topics. Your safety committees. If you have a management safety committee only, meaning the members are made up of all managers, I would reconsider. I really believe that there should be at least 50% employee involvement to get frontline ideas to the table. Your safety committees should be set up to address unsafe behavior as well as condition. If any of you are on the committee, listen to what people are saying. Are they only talking about things that are broken, things that need to be fixed, things that need maintenance orders put in? If that's the case, you need to redirect the committee and really take a look at behavior. So how do you do that? If you are currently conducting safety inspections of your departments, I would encourage you to incorporate questions that can be asked of employees as you conduct those audits. Questions solicit behavioral responses back. The behavioral responses that you get, good or bad, can be used to redirect and focus on your future training efforts. Lastly, with the safety committees, I strongly encourage you to find somebody that can help you conduct job safety analysis within the committee. Get the committee out from the table onto the floor. And what does a job safety analysis entail? Well, it's a 3-part form that is used to assess tasks that are considered high hazard or tasks that have repeatedly caused you harm, caused you loss. So just to give you an example, I've had clients recently conduct job safety analysis on folding machines in laundry, on securing a wheelchair using the Q-string in a van, cleaning of a slicer, change out of fryer oil. And the way the JSA works is in one column you identify the steps of the task. Next to that, you have a second column that identifies the hazards associated with each step. And the third column is brainstorming preventive measures to hopefully eliminate and, if not, minimize the exposures that you've identified. Last topic, with 2 minutes left, drug testing. So this is a little bit controversial, and a lot of people may disagree with me on this, but I strongly believe that over a 5-year period, a solid drug test program can minimize spikes of injuries with unknown cause. And if with our clients, I encourage them to implement pre-employment, post-accident, and random. In order of my preference, I think post-accident has the greatest impact, then random, then pre-employment. Without getting into a lengthy discussion on all three, I'd like to talk about post-accident for the last minute that we have. Post-accident testing is conducted by the majority of our clients when an employee is treated for an injury. Does it impact the acceptance of a claim? No, it doesn't. If somebody's been injured and it's a positive drug test, they're still going to be treated. It probably minimizes the length of that claim, because if an attorney hears that somebody has a positive drug test, they're probably not going to take on that case in the same way that they would another. But ultimately, the greatest reason that I believe post-accident testing should be put in place is because it deters employees who are considering putting in a false claim who happen to be drug users from doing so. So, whether it may also deter reporting. So that's going to be an argument from some. But I think ultimately, in the end, you are asking for a problem if you don't have a drug test program and that at least includes post-accident testing. So that wraps up my 15 minutes. Allison, I'm going to turn it over to you. Hopefully everybody on the call took a couple notes on some of the things that we went through, and I'd be glad to take questions now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John.